Hey
Solst.
all,
Hey,
how's
Good
it
to have you,
going?
man.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm super impressed with the variety of the content. There's like things, like something for everyone from like all aspects of the security industry.
Yeah,
thank you. That's been
And that's
something
not
we've
not
certainly been
easy.
trying for. Yeah.
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Really cool to see. Um,
Well, you bring a super special extra flair with some of the practical security engineering. What
hmm
do you have cooking? And I know, hey, maybe some kind of seeds or ideas for what we could kind of maybe have chat going with us. Or is there anything else that you wanted to help kind of set the stage with?
yeah, so I'll give you some context around this workshop. So this we've given it at a few conferences. It started out small and we started like adding more context. But the idea is like I I've been a security engineer at a few different companies, and I realized there's like a repeatable set of steps. Like you're kind of like doing the same thing, like the same like core concepts that you're applying like anywhere you work, no matter what type of company or industry you're in. It's
hmm
there's like, the same core concepts. And at the same time, often like even in conferences, like people will be like, hey, like I don't actually know what security engineering is. And I thought like, okay, cool, like this is a good opportunity for us to like put together like some content to like actually show people in a hands-on manner, like here's some of your day-to-day and what you would be doing. And so in this workshop, like I've put together like practical steps of like here's how you would get a security program started, and like some of the technical steps of what you would do.
Hmm.
And so before we get into the actual workshop, what I really find interesting is asking people like how they would make a product secure. So that's the part where when we get started, like I'll like enter that, but like I'm hoping to hear perspectives from chat and from Anthony, John, if you want to stay on, optional. I know you're super busy, but if you want to stay on and engage and also like give your perspectives, I think that could also be fun. And Don in the background. Don's doing a lot. We just don't see him here.
Yes, he is. Yeah, cool. Well, look, you heard him, everyone in chat. How would you make a product secure? This is a question to you. John and I are gonna maybe throw in some things. But everyone in chat, what would you do? Like, how would you approach that? That's a big question.
And if you want to
So
kick it off officially, I can give a little bit more context as well. Should
Oh,
we get
yeah,
please
started or?
fill in the
yeah,
picture, whatever
yeah.
you're
Because
feeling.
what kind of product? Yes.
Exactly. This is like the first great question is like, what exactly
Mhm.
are we securing? So I'll start sharing my screen. And by the way, this is right now like my favorite interview question to ask when I'm hiring, because it's like there are no wrong answers, right? It kind of, I find it interesting. Is also depends on the person's background. They kind of like go in different directions. And
Mhm.
I know, for example, even you have like different backgrounds. Like I think Anthony, you have more of a pen testing background, right?
Yep, yep. Pen testing, consulting, that's my thing. I actually started in the GRC space though, so I do have a soft
Oh,
spot for that. Yeah.
nice. And John, are you like, would you consider yourself more of a DFIR threat hunting background?
Yeah, I guess so. You know, professionally, realistically, where I'm at Huntress for my day job is genuinely more like, hey, blue team, incident response, triage,
Hmm.
analysis. I have at least some of the like capture the flag. Oh, understanding of I can find and exploit vulnerabilities. Ha ha he, but not a proper pen test, red team,
Hmm.
offensive emulation. I'll be the first to admit. So
Good.
Mhm.
Yeah. This is awesome. I love to
I'm
hear
surprised.
different perspectives from people in different backgrounds. So
Mhm.
to give you context to set the stage, so congratulations, you've just been hired as the head of security at a small company, and you're the first security hire. They've never had any security hire. That they've never had a security engineer. They don't know much about security, right? So you're the first person, and you're supposed to help them figure it out. And so to Anthony's first question is like, what does the company do? What's the product? And so I built a web app, which is going to be like the product we're trying to secure. So this web app is a Ruby on Rails social media clown themed social media platform. And you can this is a public repo. You can clone it locally and run it locally if you want. Now, just to make things easier, I hosted it on jester.social. It's a droplet, DigitalOcean droplet. And so this web app, basically, you can sign up. You can pick your clown name, and a type of clown, like I'm a Joker, and then one of the photos, and then a password. And you can register, and then it drops you in, and it's just a social media platform. You can by the way, this might crash, and it's like held together by duct tape. I don't know if it's going to handle any load, but you can tweet, you can honk or bonk other people's tweets and comment under them. So it's the point is, there is a working web app that we're trying to secure. Right now, given that information, so yeah, you were hired, and the first thing you might ask is like, why did you hire me? And they say something like, help make our product more secure. Like generally, that's around like one of the reasons they might hire you. Sometimes they might say like more compliant, and so that's the starting point. So now I want to hear from everyone, like, what comes to your mind first? Like, how do you approach that problem?
So, first of all, I do want to say that app looks really fun. I just want to throw that out there right away. I kind of want to use that app for something. Honk and bonk the other users. I see some good things in chat. I want to say something, but I see some things in chat that are really good to start off with already. What do you think?
So
Solst?
there's a really good comment by Cow Security, is first step is talking to engineers. I really like that, because then it emphasizes that the relationship you're going to have with engineers, and you're not working in a silo, you're working with other people. That's a really good one. So we can say talk to engineers. Good one. What else?
I want some like QA tests. I want some like, I don't know if it's a staging environment, but I do want some validation that the functionality is doing what it should be. Security wise too.
And then
So John, you're thinking of it more of a like live validation, like interacting with the staging environment, like live,
Totally.
to actually
Real
surface.
tests.
Yeah,
Yeah.
real tests. Yeah, that's a good one. So what bucket would you put that under?
How do you mean?
So
like
I think
pipeline wise, or
I think a good name for that is, let's call it dynamic testing,
Cool.
All right.
because you're interacting with a live environment.
I think I want to go a little bit earlier in, and I want to know what data we stand to lose, because I am a pen tester and I want to
Ooh.
break and take things. So, first of
Ooh.
all, what do we even store? What can be held against us in that? Yeah, I want to know like the data. Is it PII? Is it PCI? That's kind of my first thought.
That's a really good one. So understanding the purpose of the app and what kind of data it stores and how people interact with it, that's super important, because it also determines what like compliance requirements we have. That's a good one. There's some good ones in the chat, like map
Yeah.
the company. Another good one by Cow Security is, what do they mean by more secure? So my take on this is, usually they don't know. It's up to you to define that. It's kind of your job to tell them what more secure is. But that's a good point, is setting expectations with them. There's another good one by Vance here. How does the authentication and authorization work, and is there logging? So that's also a good one, is how is the app engineered? Auth and then logging. We do want to make sure that those are in place. That's a good question to ask. Weishen says, who has access? How is it administered? What runs in the background? So yeah, understanding the app. Very good. Secrets and what's considered private by Hotplate. So definitely secrets as well.
This list is getting bigger and bigger and bigger.
Mhm.
There's more to cover.
Yeah,
This is
I
like a
kind
little
of.
tabletop. Yeah.
This is called chat-based security program. Chat
We
is
just asked
running
which. That's all.
security. And so for things like in the case of like here dynamic testing, like if you have a staging environment and some validations, like how would you test it? Like what would you do with it?
This is where I might jump the gun, but I would want to get to like I don't want to say pen test it, I don't want to say red team it, but I guess I'm kind of starting to chip away at that. Like, are we testing those in the security sense? Maybe that's too far. But
No, nothing's too far. So pen testing is definitely one part of it. Can you think of something we could do that's like more automatable? Doesn't rely on a third party?
I don't know if you're having me drive towards CI/CD or not. I don't know if we're falling off the cliff already.
There are no wrong answers here.
I think we're getting to the static realm. Yeah.
CI/CD checks is definitely something that we would like to have. That would be nice to have, right?
Oh yeah.
So Access has a nice comment saying, "How does code get into prod?" And that's a good question. So usually in a product, how do you how have you seen code get into prod? What do you think? And this I'm gonna make it a separate section because I think it's a very important one. And Access started the conversation around code, right? So how does it get into prod?
We do it first, kind of dog fooding in the staging environment, then testing. Then when it like passes our sniff test, whatever we want to call that or treat that, okay, then we could schedule or stage some deployment time and say like, all right, this is actually going to be pushed to production at this time, and like let folks know, let the team, everybody know, whatever we need to have for just the communication and coordination of that.
So I really like that because you mentioned the sniff test. And that's actually one of our main responsibilities. So we want to do that. That's exactly what we want to do. And what sort of sniff tests can we implement here?
I'm going to give that to someone else. You're putting us in the hot seat, Solst. We didn't know. We weren't aware.
No, that's
we're
good.
Designing
Again,
security on the fly.
There are no wrong answers, and everything you've been saying has been correct. Another way to think of it is let's say you're consulting someone and they tell you like, hey, we're writing code, and before we deploy it, we want to make sure that the code is reasonable enough. So what should we do here to make sure that like, does the code have any bugs?
Well, I think we need some tests. We need some test conditions. We need to determine exactly where something could go wrong. So sort of understanding like what is our threat surface at this stage?
These are really good. So yeah, testing. So in the traditional definition of testing is like the developers can write test cases when they write their code so that it validates that the so yeah, Access as unit and end-to-end testing. That's definitely a good start. And I'm reading some other chat suggestions. So maintaining an SBOM and asset inventory is also a good one. So that is close to the code. And
quick acronym clarification for folks. SBOM is being software bill of materials. So, hey, what are the ingredients in this recipe? What dependencies do you have? What libraries, what packages? How do you actually have this built out? And are there anything that's third party? That's not what you had made on your own. Literally, what is the bill of materials for the software?
That's exactly right. And you said the magic word. I like to call it dependencies. But so I think the dependencies is like the like second stage of code. Like code, usually we mean like code our own developers, right? But then our own developers are not the ones actually writing all of the code. Sometimes they use other people's code, and that's comes in the form of libraries or dependencies. And SBOM here means like I want to have a list of all of the different libraries and dependencies that we use in our product, right? And again, when we say product, in this case, it means like this web app, right? This web app has code. It also has dependencies. It also has other components. Maybe you can think of some. Wishen said config management. That's a nice one to be aware of. Configuration of what? I think you're on the right track. What exactly are we hosting the configuration of?
Am I going too far down the wrong direction if I'm thinking about like, hey, our database, the users, the PII that they might have had in their registration, is there a subscription? Is it paid access? Is there someone that has some bank information in there? Or are there some registration things that you need for like, look, your address, your phone number, some verification? That could
I
be
actually
another hot point.
I really like that. I actually really like that because typically I don't really include data as one of the components here, but I think you convinced me. I think the data itself could be another component here.
Yeah. Kind of, you got to know what's being stored, right? Like, because you could pass off this to a third party, someone else could process it for you. But if a user isn't entering something personal or identifiable or credit related, right? Um, if that is stored locally, then there is always the chance of it getting exposed at some point. And that's kind of like the crux of it. So understanding that right away is going to be quite important. But if we don't have that information, well, then that's a huge thing we can eliminate from, I think, our efforts.
That's a really good one. So Advocate Mac said IAC review infrastructure as code. IAC is infrastructure as code. And so I think you're going into a nice path here. So infrastructure as code is between code and the other component being let's put it down here, infrastructure. So the infra itself, and what does infra mean? And so I mean, arguably you could consider database being a subset of infrastructure, but so this app is hosted somewhere, right? In this case, it's a DigitalOcean droplet running Docker, but it could be hosted on an EC2 instance in AWS. It could be hosted on just like a local machine, right? The app is hosted somewhere, and there's not just one server. The there's multiple components in the architecture. Like there could be like a load balancer first, right? And then that takes you to a server. So the infra is a good part of it, and so you might have infra as code or IAC. You might have like config files for the infra. And so for things like infrastructure, how would you test that? What's your favorite tool to like test infrastructure for security issues?
Given a moment for chat to chime in. I know stream delay might be a thing. So I guess I'm thinking like infrastructure as code makes me want Terraform. That makes me want to look at what is in those actual Terraform like files, those modules. Are there, for some reason, secrets actually embedded in those? There totally shouldn't be. I guess if I were trying to explore baseless maybe, but I'm like, hey, can I use Trufflehog? Could I be looking inside of our Git environment? Is there stuff that's pushed there that shouldn't be? Do we have environment.env files just dangling out and about? Do those fit close enough in the infrastructure bucket, or maybe I guess code is probably the better proper place for those? Some of them.
Yeah, the IAC is weird because it's kind of both. A lot of
Yeah.
the like controls we add for code scanning would apply for IAC. And then infra is like part of it is code scanning, and then the other part would fall under dynamic testing. So someone in let me read in the chat said Nmap, and that's a good example of a scanner you can use to assess your infrastructure. There's other vulnerability scanners. Oh, so Advocate Mac here said OpenGrep or SemGrep. And so this is here part of the sniff test. I do like to include tools like SemGrep or OpenGrep, which is just like a fork of SemGrep. But yeah, this is a good tool that you would use to scan your code.
We've made a pretty big picture. Are we still missing a couple things?
Yeah, because
I
we're
mean,
dealing with a web app, right? No one's mentioned anything on the API security side of things. I know that kind of fits on dependencies, but I mean, we're dealing with a web app, right? We're gonna have a lot of things talking. So what are our endpoints?
That's a really good one. That's a really good one. I like to put that under dynamic testing. List endpoints and like what APIs are accessible here. And maybe you want to test those live, or it could fall under the code as well. But that's a really good one.
It's a lot of good stuff. Chat is really delivering as well too. This is great.
Access has a really good one as well. What about SIM or SIEM? So where should we put that? Maybe
like telemetry monitoring.
Yeah. Let's make a new section like logging.
Yeah.
And monitoring.
Yeah.
And that here means you have things like SIEM, which is just something like Splunk, but it's just a centralized platform that you send all of your logs to, and then you have alerts there that can flag any sketchy stuff happening. Oh, and so Cow Security mentioned a interesting thing here. So Cow Security said the answer to how would you actually do dynamic testing, and Cow Security mentioned DAST. So DAST is dynamic application security testing, and these are tools that help us dynamically test things that are deployed. What do you think? Is this a good start for a security program? Are we missing anything?
Yeah, I mean, it's really funny. This is something that I feel like I want to keep and then keep referring back to and then keep revising and reviewing and keep adding to as, we come up and we think of more things. Not wanting to boil the ocean right away, but I feel like this is totally, all right, yeah, enough to get us thinking.
Yeah.
Quite a bit.
And it's true that the more you think about it, the more you suddenly find things like, oh, maybe we should consider that. Like one thing is under data, maybe you might even have things like compliance requirements. Why? Because when people say like make our product more secure, ideally they care about security, but often why would anyone hire you? Often is they're getting bullied by their clients to be compliant, right? Like, oh, we need SOC 2, right? And maybe I don't know if Anthony, you encounter that when like people hire you as a consultant or they will need a pen test. Sometimes they say like, oh, well, we need to do this for compliance.
It's the first thing I ask every single time. The last one that is a couple weeks ago, first thing I said, I need to know what compliance that you're actually, first thing.
Right. That makes sense. And so that's a very important part of any business today. That to them, it's a risk. We focus a lot on technical risks, but like compliance risks are also very important. That's why I thought like yesterday, like Fleetus had the workshop talking about GRC, and I thought like that's actually really good to know, because in addition to like all the technical controls you have, you need to be aware of all of the implications of GRC, governance, risk, and compliance.
Yeah. Another thing, well, we can probably keep digging at this, but I mean, supply chain. I guess that technically does also fall under dependencies as well too. But I mean, look at all the NPM stuff as of late, and the more, and we don't have AI, right? So like, is AI involved as well too?
I saw it asked in the chat every now and again.
Was
Like,
it?
oh, what about AI?
Yeah, of everything we've talked about lately, right? Yeah.
So I don't. I mean, I'd like
Is
to
it
hear your
good?
thoughts. AI is definitely very relevant because now it's unavoidable. But
Mhm.
sometimes I think like AI is kind of like implicit in all different parts that we look at here.
Yeah.
You know, because AI in itself is like a small product. Also, which AI? Because now, what like what are you talking about? Like AI to generate code? Is it like part of the developer tools? Is it like an AI agent running in production? But that reminded me, there is another thing here as well, which is I like to call it um, corpsec, corporate security, but that means like who's writing the code and how, right? So developer tools, developer infrastructure, the developer practices, right? Like the developers themselves,
Yeah.
right? And so here, part of AI could be part of the dev tools. AI could be used in one of our own checks. AI could be used as part of the product as a dependency. AI could be used as somewhere in the data as well. So there's different components of AI, right?
I don't think we particularly need AI in production, so to speak. Like, there's no part of our Jester social media app that hopefully we don't have a grok feature, you know, oh, ask something in a thread of conversations. But I think it's naive to think that we don't have developers using AI to write code. So I would be wanting to hunker down to a certain extent of like, hey, what's going into the prompts? Do we have some at least layer in between those for, again, catching secrets, catching PII, catching things that we wouldn't want outgoing? That's a whole nother can of worms, obviously, but I feel like for our perspective, it would be in the development lifecycle more so than like, oh, we have agents running in our production sort of thing. Am I wrong
So
in that?
no, I generally I agree with you, but one thing I learned myself is that um we are risk averse as professionals generally, and we want to like minimize features, but usually the products are built by like product managers and product leads, and they just want to sell. And you might be working in a company and they say like, you know what, we want to have an AI feature in our product. We want to have a small chat bubble here where people can talk to a chat, and we want to have like some sort of button here where people can AI generate their own tweets, or not tweet, jests or whatever, right? Like, so and what do you do as a security engineer? Do you tell them like, no, you can't do that? Well, you kind of have to like assess the risk of that feature, tell them like the pros and cons, and then it's up to them ultimately. And so what I do see often is that people decide like, okay, we do want to implement an AI feature within our product, even though we think it's useless, right? It's like ultimately the decision is made by the product team.
Mhm.
So maybe part of corporate security is also like engaging with the product team and um, threat modeling. Someone in chat mentioned threat modeling earlier, but I think that's a good one. Is like if they do want to have a AI feature in our product, then it's like up to us to say like, here are the pros and cons, here are the things that could go wrong, and how we would deal with it.
Mhm. Yeah, this is really good. I think also we'd eventually just start moving further along, right? Like we start getting into external third-party assessments and tests, which I think are going to be
Mhm.
driven by some of the GRC and compliance side. But this already is really solid for a security program. I think some of the base stuff like change management, patch management, asset management, like all the base stuff should be there too. But this is solid. This is really good so far. The question I have now at this point for you, Souls, then is where does this tie in to the rest of this app that we're building. Yeah, because I know you want to talk about this, but now how does this turn into the next step of your workshop, or is this it? Do you want to just tabletop the entire time? I'm curious.
No, yeah, let's do it. And that's a great time to segue. I love
Little
it.
segue.
So yeah, thanks, Anthony.
We're
So yeah,
waiting for our
basically,
opportunity to hide, by the way.
yeah, no, we're good, we're good. Let's
I mean,
I'll
John
now
and I, we
share.
keep shooting stuff like all day. So yeah,
So I'll get into this now. So yeah, if you want to drop off, that's perfect. Thank you so much
Hey,
for
take it away, my
participating.
friend.
By the
Really
way,
looking forward to this. It'll be awesome.
thank you.
thank you. So yeah, basically we saw all of this in theory, right? And this is a lot of good stuff, right? And now the question is, okay, like how do we actually make a product more secure in practice? How do we implement those? And that's what my workshop is about. So you are hired as the head of security. You want to make things secure. So in this case, it's a Ruby on Rails app. Some people ask like, "Hey, why Ruby on Rails?" Like it doesn't matter. That's not what you're gonna ask when you get hired. Like you were just hired. They already have a product. Figure it out, right? So now some of the stuff we want to look at is the main buckets are code, libraries or dependencies, and like runtime, I call it, which is like things that are actually deployed. So so this is what the workshop covers. And so the first step is how we're going to actually implement those steps, right? So this is the repo of the app. So the first thing you can do is you can just fork it, right? And forking it, you're going to have your own copy of it in your own GitHub account, right? And all of the work we're going to do will be in your own copy of the repo, right? So you're going to pretend like, okay, this is the product, and what are you going to do about it? How are you going to secure it? So it's in GitHub, and a lot of products you're likely going to work at in the industry are going to be hosted on GitHub. There are some exceptions, of course, like some people like to use GitLab. In the gaming industry, Perforce is very popular. Um, it is quite annoying to deal with, but GitHub is probably like the easiest, and I think the most popular. Most of the products I've dealt with were just Perforce. So in GitHub, a very easy way to automate your security controls is through GitHub Actions. Okay, and GitHub Actions, um, essentially, it's a YAML file that you put in this folder of your GitHub directory, right? So on your GitHub repo, anything that's under .github/workflows is a potential GitHub action, and that means you can run it on GitHub's infrastructure, or you can self-host your GitHub runners if you want. And that gives you the ability to run automations through GitHub, and you can set conditions for them on when to run. And we'll see a few examples of that. So the first thing we want to implement, and all of the checks we're gonna be doing here are through GitHub Actions. Now, you don't have to use GitHub Actions. Like some products can integrate and use their own infrastructure to scan. You can set up your own scanning infrastructure if you would like. It just like, let's say we want to set up this program, it's a security program for free without paying anything. So we're going to use open source and free tools. GitHub Actions is free to use up to a certain limit. So the first thing we want to implement is SAST, static application security testing. And in the chat, let me know if you've used SAST tools before and which ones. I'm always curious to hear what people like to use. In this case, in this workshop, we implement SemGrep. Now, there are alternatives to SemGrep if you want to scan your code. The purpose of SAST is it just runs line by line. It looks at your code, the code that is in the repo, the code that people wrote, and it determines like, are there any bad patterns or known vulnerabilities in this code, right? So in this workshop, I picked SemGrep. So SemGrep has a free version. And the free version, you can use it either locally or you can run it as a GitHub action. So there are others like Aikido has a good SaaS product. There's CodeQL, which is in GitHub, but to use it at scale, you need, or in private repos, you need GitHub Advanced Security, which is a license that can become expensive. Uh, and um, there's all some people mentioned OpenGrep earlier. Yeah, it's also good. It's a fork of SemGrep. I think SemGrep wanted to license some of their um rules. So at some point there was like some vendors used to like wrap around SemGrep and sell it, and SemGrep was like, we were selling our own thing now. So those vendors forked SemGrep into OpenGrep, the old one version of SemGrep, and like released their own thing. That's also fine. Like I like both. I use both depending on the case. But the main one is SemGrep for now, for this workshop at least. So you can run it locally. You can just like brew install SemGrep, or you can run it in a Docker container. You can, if you're on Windows, I like to use WSL, Windows Subsystem for Linux. That gives you a nice environment to develop and run things. So I would recommend using either Linux, macOS, or WSL if you're on Windows to use this workshop. But actually, you do the entire workshop in your browser through GitHub. So the first step is you can run SemGrep locally on any repo or on any code base you want. And that's always something I recommend. You want to get a feel of how the tool works. So pick any code base, maybe something you wrote. If you have nothing, you can just clone just your social locally and run this. And this is what it looks like when it runs. It will scan the code and it will show you a list of vulnerabilities. Now, the way it works is by rules. So SemGrep has a bunch of different rules that it uses depending on the language. You can also use third-party rules. A quick note is usually scanner output. We call it findings. A finding is not necessarily a vulnerability because one of the downsides is a false positive. So some of these static analysis tools can have a high false positive rate. So we have to triage the findings once they're done. So the process itself looks something like that. Like you first run it manually, you get a feeling for it, then you deploy the SaaS tool in report only mode. So it's not blocking developers from pushing code, it's just like trying to detect or like surface findings. And inevitably, you're going to find that some of the rules are noisy. And so you would want to tweak the rules to reduce the noise so that there are not too many false positives. And then you maintain it in blocking mode at the end if you want to block developers from pushing vulnerable code. So some of you might be familiar with like some of the limitations or downsides of using SAST. One of the downsides is it can give a false sense of security in some cases. And one example is traditional SAST doesn't have a lot of context on what you're trying to do. And the example I like to give is it can detect when you're trying to use AES in ECB mode, and that's the classic like ECB penguin on why it's bad. It doesn't actually like hide the data very well. Instead, you should be using AES GCM, right? And so a SaaS tool might give you that recommendation, but it doesn't have the context to know like, wait, actually, this is a password, and we should actually be hashing it rather than encrypting it, right? So that's more of a architectural review that would catch that. Now, at the end, we'll talk a little bit about AI SaaS that would be able to surface this. So for SemGrep rules, I mean, you can use your own, you can use other people's. There's a bunch of nice collections of SemGrep rules by folks that maintain their own. Trail of Bits has a group of SemGrep rules. GitLab maintains a bunch of good ones. Um, this person, I don't know how to pronounce his handle, but he has a repo about a tool that is a SemGrep rules manager, and it lists a bunch of others rule collections. So the lab itself is you want to add SemGrep to run as a GitHub action. How exactly do you do that? So in the repo where you want to add the scan, you just create a new file. Now you can use the command line, but like just to make things easy, I'm just showing how to do it in the browser. I think many people just use the command line instead. You add this file. You're adding this file to the repo that you want to scan, and you're pasting this GitHub action here. So the GitHub action here, there's a similar format to all GitHub actions. It starts with a name, then the trigger condition, like when should this GitHub action run. In this case, it runs on pull requests and whenever someone pushes to master or main. Then it runs SemGrep. Basically, there are predefined images that you can pull. So it just fetches the SemGrep image and runs this command line. So basically, it runs a SemGrep scan with the default rule sets. It saves the results in JSON. You can pick serif if you want, and then puts it in a file. And then later we reference this external other GitHub action we wrote that just annotates the just to simplify this a bit. But we'll see. It basically just like leaves a comment saying like this is vulnerable. And so you just basically make this file, paste the contents, and this is when you follow the instructions in this workshop. And I recommend like you taking each step manually and doing it, because that's like the best way to learn, is like actually going through this. So you commit those changes. Now you have a new file under this path, and the contents of the file are this GitHub action contents. And so this means that the rest is handled by GitHub automatically. GitHub will trigger whenever these conditions are met. So whenever someone opens a pull request or merges or pushes to main, it will run this step here. If it's the first time that you're running a GitHub action, you might see this message here, and you just click, yeah, understand, enable GitHub actions, and it will unlock this tab here. So this is a example of a repo that where I have done this work. Well, actually, as I was making the content for this lab, I made it all in this repo, and I'll show you that here is the GitHub action. You can just go under .github, .workflows, and this is the SemGrep one, and these are the contents of the GitHub action itself, and that's all you need to do to enable it. Like everything that's under .github/workflows is automatically enabled. And how do we know if it actually ran? There's a useful actions tab here in GitHub, and so you can click on actions, and then you can just, these are all different action runs. We can go to SemGrep scan because there's other actions, as we'll see. We can go to one of these are all pushes, either pull requests or someone pushed to main, and you can just open one of the runs, and you can see the results of the run here. You can also click on the scan itself, and it shows you the logs. And so, for example, here you see some of the logs as if you ran SemGrep locally. Advocate Mac asked, will SAST still exist in the age of AI? And so that's exactly the last section of this that question here. The last section of this workshop, I actually do cover this. I'll try to get it in like 10 minutes. But that's a really good question. I think ideally you want a combination of like AI and SAST. Many of them, we call them AI native SAST now. So once we have the SemGrep action set up, the next step we're going to take is we're going to actually add vulnerable code. So in this example, I just modified one of the Rails controller files to have vulnerable code. It doesn't matter. You can just like, you can go, there's like repos that you can Google like purposely vulnerable code and like paste it, and it should be fine. But in this case, we took an existing controller, it's a Rails thing, and we modified it to work like this. Now, you might not be familiar with Ruby or Rails, and you might be like, I don't know what this means, but that's exactly the purpose of SAST tools. I don't have to be a Ruby expert, right? The SAST tool can do the job for me and try to surface potentially vulnerable lines here. Now, in this case, dot where, and then it gets turned into a SQL query. And so we're taking a param directly from the user, and that means that this is vulnerable to SQL injection. And so we're going to see if semgrep catches it. So basically, we just edit the file, we add these new contents, which has the vulnerable line, and we open a pull request. And the pull request would look like that. Actually, I can just show it to you here under pull requests. This was the actual pull request I opened. You can go to files changed, and you see that this is the vulnerable line here. And we see there's an annotation here. And this is part of the results from semgrep. So we see that semgrep was able to say like, hey, I found that this is potential SQL injection. And it's correct. So this means that we were able to find a way to flag vulnerabilities in our code. Right? So like in the grand scheme of things, I'm responsible for security at the company. I want to make sure that whenever someone writes code, something's checking their code for potential vulnerabilities, and this is doing exactly that. So there's a certain guarantee that like whenever you push code to the company, it's being reviewed for potential vulnerabilities. So that is the first section, which is SAST. Now there are some minor tweaks you can do here. We'll cover them, in the workshop. A small bonus section is like, well, what if the GitHub action itself is vulnerable? So there's an open source tool called Zizmore. You can use that. It's a static analysis tool for GitHub actions, because GitHub actions can have vulnerabilities, as we've seen in a bunch of recent compromises. So that is for scanning the code itself, right? If you go back to here, static analysis is part of this section. Now, what about dynamic testing? So the second section is about DAST, dynamic application security testing. So if SAST scans the code itself line by line, DAST will go to the deployed app and engage with it directly. And the advantage of that is you can either analyze each component individually when you're working on a product, or ideally you can analyze the entire product as a whole, right? Because sometimes even if you analyze every single, I can look at all of the code, I can look at every single config, I can look at my load balancers, but ultimately the product is, or the state of security of the product itself is an emergent property of the final product, not just from each component individually. So there's a lot of value by like looking directly at what is actually deployed. So ideally you want to do both, right? So DAST, sometimes it has a lot of false positives. It can be hard to set up. You have to make sure you set up authentication properly. Now for DAST tools, I have slightly less than 10 minutes left, so I'm going to go a bit quick over that. But in the workshop itself, you can go and follow these all step by step. So I gave three examples of DAST tools. Well, I call them DAST, but it's debatable, but you'll see. So the first one I like is Nuclei. So Nuclei is a open source tool. It's you can find it on GitHub. It's by Project Discovery, and it's a template based scanner. So similar to how semgrep had rules for scanning, Nuclei has templates, and the idea is I give it things I feed it into the nuclei binary, and when it's scanning, it's basically a set of checks for things to actually check on in production. So it's good to surface things like, did I misconfigure any of my HTTP headers or any of my cookie flags, the typical DAST stuff, or are there potential like issues in how my app is configured, right? You can basically either run it locally, or you can run it as a GitHub action. Same thing, right? So Nuclei, here I illustrate how you can either run it manually through a dispatch or on a cron job. So GitHub Actions is good to know that you can just run them on the schedule. Now, one thing worth noting, you could have that inside the repo itself of the code base, or you could set up your own testing repo, right? Like you can have your own repo that's like DAST scans or like security automations, and then you can set up all of those automated GitHub actions to run on a schedule in that repo there, and you can point them at like different sites, right? You can have like your own like GitHub based infrastructure for scanning. And so what this does is same thing. It just runs a GitHub action. The trigger condition is, in this case, I commented this out and just left workflow dispatch. We can just look at it here. So workflows and then nuclei scanner. And so workflow dispatch means I can trigger this to run manually whenever I want on demand. And then it runs these checks. So Advocate Mac asked a good question. What's the difference between nuclei and zap, which I've heard of? So that's a good question, and I'll get to that in a second. So nuclei will look for these specific templates and will scan your website, your target here. And we basically go through how to set it up and then where the findings will occur. So this GitHub action is set up to upload to the GitHub security dashboard, which means that in this repo, I can just go to security. I can go to no, this is a later stage. So here under code scanning, and I can see all of the results of my nuclei scan. Right, so that gives you a nice dashboard to look at all your findings here from DAST. Other than nuclei, I did cover Zap next, right? So that goes back to your question. So Zap is it can be used as an HTTP proxy similar to Burp Suite, and that means like you can use it to test your applications manually. Or once again, you can just run it as a GitHub action. So same thing, either on a schedule or manual runs, you can just paste this action. And similar thing, you can get it to, in this case, I want to test like, can we get it to open GitHub issues, right? And that's what we did. Like you set up this GitHub action, you should follow the steps and do it yourself. And you configure it to open issues. And then, once it runs the scan, it opens an issue here and it lists all of the findings it has. And so some of the findings are real. Like, for example, I think Nuclei flagged like this Rails app is deployed in debug mode, which is correct. I did actually deploy it in debug mode. So it means it has some verbose error messages. And the third one is Nmap. So Nmap is not really considered a DAS. It's more of a infrastructure scanner. But you can still link it to some like vulnerability bases. And I just like the idea of having Nmap run periodically as part of CI/CD automatically. So this is also a module here on how you can set up Nmap, and you can get it to output PDF reports that you can download from the artifacts here, straight from GitHub Actions. So really, it's a whole security program is just running within GitHub Actions. So I need to start wrapping up. So real quick, I'm going to go through the extra sections I have here. So you have SCA. So here we mentioned that there's dependencies, right? How do we assess our dependencies for vulnerabilities? So there are a bunch of different tools you could use. GitHub has Dependabot. So it's actually a company they acquired in maybe 2016, or it's been a while, but like it's now integrated into GitHub, and you can enable it on all of your repos. And what it does is it looks for dependencies and software libraries that you use in your code base, and it has vulnerability scanning for them. It basically compares them against known vulnerabilities and tells you if they are. So you can just enable it from settings. You enable all of these, and then once it's enabled, wait a few minutes, and it can automatically start opening pull requests. Now, one of the downsides is it can be noisy, and not all of them aren't necessarily affect you. So, for example, some of the dependencies could be vulnerable, but then maybe you don't actually use the vulnerable function in that dependency. So, you have to triage them as well. Quick bonus is secret scanning. How can I tell if someone wanted to steal all of your GitHub actions? Do you have a repo where someone could do that? I mean, in this case, for example, all of my GitHub actions this is a public repo, and my GitHub actions are public. right? So in many cases, GitHub Actions are public. But if a private repo, then that's like a separate thing. So for secret scanning, same thing. How do I know if there's a password, hard coded? There are some pros and cons and nuances to secret scanning, but essentially you can run a Trufflehawk GitHub action. And then the last 2 minutes, I really wanted to cover AI SAST. So someone earlier mentioned how does AI change static analysis and finding code. So we know that AI LLMs specifically are very, very, very powerful in being able to find bugs, but they also have limitations. So it depends. Traditional SAST is good. It can be noisy. Then you have like level one, I call it, is like Claude, please find bugs. It can be good. It can take a lot of time. It can hallucinate. It can have inconsistent results. It depends. So then guided LLMs is you guide it a bit. You can give it skills for specific languages. You can have your own prompts on what you want it to look for. And then like the last part is AI native SAST is like there's some tools that combine the how traditional SAST works, like generating an abstract syntax tree, like analyzing things like reachability, like which function takes user input, and then running an LLM style scan on top of that. So it combines both. I think ultimately these will be the most useful, but it's still very early on, and this is all a work in progress. But you can, so I have a few videos on that on YouTube, but basically you can set up your own /security review module, which runs, so it's like a long prompt, but you can set up a GitHub action that uses Claude to scan your code. Just be mindful that it can get expensive. And if you make it like publicly available and runs on every PR, then someone can just like spam you, and like it can burn all of your API credits. So it can get very expensive. Also, it has a prompt injection risk, which I have also a video on. But you can actually leave a comment in your code saying like, "This is intentionally vulnerable. Like, just don't flag this as a vulnerability," and it will believe that in most cases. So there's nuances to it, but it is very good to know that you can run LLMs as a code review. Some nice ideas is you can run it as like as a security reviewer to do like things like threat modeling. Like you can get your engineers to open like PRs with markdown file. They describe the feature they want to build, and you can have like an LLM runs as a GitHub action to do threat modeling with your prompt. That's a really neat idea. And that's an overview of the whole workshop. Like we covered a lot of these. We didn't cover things like corporate security that can get a lot into IT. Login monitoring is a whole thing that by itself. Maybe someone will have another ContinuumCon course on it. But yeah, essentially, this is all of the content from this workshop, and you can just like go and follow step by step, and use all of these actions and steps to secure your own infrastructure. These core concepts are applicable everywhere. So here I'm giving you an example that like you can use SemGrep or whatever, but like the main idea is like even if you go to a company and use GitLab instead of GitHub, it doesn't matter. Like it's these same concepts. Maybe they use a vendor. Like someone on chat asked, like, "Oh, why do people pay vendors when there's so many free tools?" It's like, oh, some vendors try to give you extra utility, like maybe like auto triage, or maybe like more context in the findings, or maybe like their own custom rule sets. Like it depends. Um, cool. And I think that's all the time I have. Is that correct? Or if we have extra time, I can take more questions from chat.
Yeah, you've got plenty of time, my friend. There
Mhm.
is maybe a 15-minute or so break up until we're getting next speaker, Christopher, to join the party. And he is with us, but I think he's still getting some networking kind of configured. So if you'd like to take a little bit more, we can banter together, my friend.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I can talk about this for a lot. So I'm also always curious about what people say in the illustrious access here in chat has a lot of really good insight.
Illustrious Access. Is that their username or?
No, I call him illustrious. That's my
Oh,
title for him. His
okay.
username is access,
Gotcha.
aka. SES. GitHub Advanced Security tab has some good insight, he says, and I agree. Although so they keep pushing nice features in GitHub, and they keep trying to improve it. I remember talking to them like maybe like a year ago or 2 years ago, saying like they wanted to push their own ASPM, or like basically a platform that like ingests all vulnerabilities from different platforms into one place for triage. I don't haven't heard anything around that since. But basically, they keep like trying to improve how they present security findings and make them useful. The one thing worth noting is GitHub Advanced Security can get expensive for large orgs. So some people just go with different vendors. That becomes like part of security is also like you start like having to compare different vendors and pricing. That's unfortunately part of our job as well.
Can I ask, have you seen anyone do wild and crazy things, or even more, I don't know, different innovations that they're using, things like GitHub Actions or other CI/CD solutions, to be able to build in more of the static analysis or more of the dynamic analysis? Do you have any other, I don't know, just the stuff that you've seen, both good, bad, and ugly?
Yeah, that's a interesting question, because recently the team PCP compromises. So were you like heading in that direction? Yeah.
Just in
No,
case, you know.
yeah, yeah, those were super interesting. So um as we've seen here, the GitHub Actions, you can set different triggers for them, for when they trigger, and like what how they work. And so in some repos, those GitHub Actions are public, or public repos, right? Or you could have a repo that like reads things from like issues, triggers when someone opens an issue, right, or opens a pull request. So these can be vulnerable. You can exploit them, right? Like you can have, because like the ultimately the GitHub action can run any script you want. Like you can actually, I think my nmap action is just a script I wrote. It's literally just run, and it's basically just a bash script, literally just a bash script. So you can run whatever you want in a GitHub action. And so some of the compromises were super interesting. Um, they had I think one example was there was shell expansion where they took the name of the GitHub issue that the user opened, and they just expanded it in the shell, because I think they wanted to, I forget why they wanted to create a file name, or echo it into a for some reason, right? And so what Team PCP did was they added their malicious command in the name of the GitHub issue itself, and that executed when they were running the GitHub action, which automatically triggered, and they use it to exfiltrate secrets. So another thing worth noting is that under settings here, you have a secrets thing. So there are variables that you can give specifically to your GitHub actions. And those secrets could be, API keys, could give access to AWS, or like write access to GitHub, which many people did put their keys here to make the GitHub action useful. And so that's how Team PCP ended up getting access to some of the compromises they did was through that. And that's why the tools, as more I mentioned, is important to use, like make sure you're scanning your own GitHub actions to prevent this sort of compromise. Wow, good question, John. You nerd sniped me.
That is part of the job.
Have you been seeing on your end like GitHub action related drama?
Not real, not currently, but that's my
Mhm,
own ignorance, that's my own nativity, that's me just having my head in the sand. But I really like to play with CI/CD, or like just the
mhm,
whole concept of that is crazy, as knowing it is an attack surface in its own right. Sometimes I had some silly videos where we were playing with like CI/CD goat, or again like
mhm.
a vulnerable rendition of it where you could hack along and to go find those injection points to, yeah, have vulnerable GitHub actions. But it's so cool because I really have to think this is real security, like actual, real, genuine security engineering, for when you really actually genuinely have a real product that you really actually genuinely need to make secure.
So and here, the CI/CD pipeline itself is part of what we want to secure as well. Very important part. and sometimes people forget that like there's many different ways you can like CI/CD is just basically you have a code base and you want to deploy it somewhere. What's in between? How do you get from code to thing running? And there's many ways of doing it, and that process you have is something you absolutely want to make sure is secure as well.
So I had a question for you, man, because I don't get enough time to go and dig around the code and get earlier on that side of things. I'm not an engineer, I'm not a dev to that regards, but I think you have a lot more experience in this side of the house. How how many issues or what types of issues are you seeing with like visibility? Because right
Wow.
now, yeah, right, yeah, it's a concern. I don't write code, but I have coded enough and I know how to mess around with it, and I've built small apps, and I can only imagine with these large monolithic sprawling code bases, visibility right now. Like what are your takes on that?
Yeah, I don't know where I would put that, but yeah, that's a great one because um it's no different than like code and infrastructure, right? And it's I consider it all part of either shadow IT or like lack
Yeah.
of or the problem of observability in general. And the idea is like sometimes you think like in this case, in our case, Just Social, it's very easy. I have this one repo,
Mhm.
but actually even here, is this actually it? Actually, there is
Right.
more. It's not here because I deployed this on DigitalOcean as a droplet. Now
Mm,
it has a TLS cert, so actually there's a another Docker container called Caddy which fronts it, and that shows you the TLS cert, and then in the background redirects you. So even here already, there's components that do I have full visibility into all of
mhm.
this, right? Like already I have a problem, and that's like the simplest app you could possibly have, right? And so in one common thing, for example, to your point of like visibility is like in this case, it's all under the Astarti GitHub org,
Mhm.
and companies often have many different GitHub orgs, and so sometimes you forget like you have your main product on your main GitHub org, but then there's this other GitHub org that like CX, like customer experience uses, or like for custom solutions that like one-off scripts that your clients might ask, and we forget to enable integrations on that GitHub org,
Mhm.
or like someone for whatever reason decided to spin up a new GitHub org to host their code there. So um, how do you like configure that, all of your tools to be running? Well, first of all, how do you ensure visibility?
Yeah.
And inevitably that ends up being a policy problem,
Yeah.
right? Like you can have as many technical controls as you want to try to surface, like where is my code hosted, what servers are we hosting our code on, who's writing the code, where it's coming from. I can try to have um as many like security tools and stuff to try to surface that, but ultimately someone can just like create like a personal GitHub org, use their own personal account and start writing code there and be like, oh, I'm associated with your org, and it's like, well, how can I know? you know Using a personal laptop, right? Like then they have zero visibility, so then
Yeah.
becomes more of a policy and governance thing of like, how can I surface all of these, and you want to have a standardized process that all of your developers follow so that you have this visibility. But it's a never ending like problem. Like
Yeah.
you're always going to have gaps.
It's
Why
sprawling,
did you
right?
bring it up?
So I brought it up because like we're getting to a point now where production generation of the code base is not so much of the slow down bottleneck part of the pipeline, because now we can spit out code pretty quickly with generation tools and AI models, et cetera, right? But we're really losing visibility to see how much is being interacted with, where are the bugs being generated, with that production capability being like exponentially increased. So that's why I was kind of curious, like, are you seeing new trends, new patterns, new things happening in the landscape in that regard as people are onboarding more LLMs into their pipeline? I'd be curious.
Yeah, sorry, I just stopped sharing my screen here.
Yeah. Okay.
um
You
yeah,
can
and other things also, just like whatever the organization wants, like nowadays, a lot of orgs are pushing for like using AI and using like new ways to push code,
Mhm.
and kind of like back to what we were saying earlier, is like you just have to like support whatever they want, right? And I can have my own opinions of like, this is how your pipeline is supposed to work. But like, if all of your developers want to be using this like trendy new way of like deploying code, then it's your problem to like figure it out. Like, think about it. Like, how are you supposed to add some sort of governance and like secure defaults on it? And here it always comes to the classic problem of friction, avoiding friction with developers. So I feel like it used to be more common, or like, years ago, where the security org would just come and say, no, you can't do that, right? But that's not actually helpful if
Mhm.
you always say, no, you can do that, because ultimately, as a security team, you're not contributing to the bottom line, to like the money being made by the org. The developers are. So like, you can't just say no all the time, because then they're going to be like, okay, I'm just going to ignore security and go do my own thing
Yeah.
forever. And now you have even less visibility. So instead, you make their lives easier. And ideally, that the easiest path is also the secure path. And so they'll be like, oh, let me just use this paved road that security helped me with. And now you have visibility and their lives are easier. So like, that's like the ideal use case.
Yeah. Play well with others. Key.
Looks
Cool.
like Christopher is good to go.
Yeah, I think he's good to go now. Appreciate you keeping us going over here, Solst, as we're
Anytime.
figuring out the back end over there. But Christopher, I think you are here. I see him in the back. Well, I'll say in the meantime, because we might have to bring him on and then kind of just do a quick test. How do we feel about that? Just real quick. Christopher, are you good? We saw you kind of floating around back there.
Yeah, I'm here. I'm here.
Excellent.
Okay, cool.
Enjoy.
Well, look, Solst, thank you, man. That was an awesome workshop. Amazing tabletop. I was even saying in the back end in our internal chat, so one level deeper, I was like, man, I think we need another follow-up tabletop session like that. That'd be kind of cool.
Anytime. Yeah, you should.
Thank you, my
Thanks,
friend.
man.
Great
Have a good
work.
day.
Have a good one.